Alrighty. So, just as a quick reference where we're going, we've been talking about the book of Acts and of course what happened in the book of Acts. And if you didn't know, Acts is just short. It's known as Acts of the Apostles. The author Luke, he wrote both the Gospel of Luke and the Acts of the Apostles as kind of he was trying to document what was going on and what was happening at the time of Jesus and what was going on with this movement of the way, because there were so many questions, and so he went out and he collected all this information and he put together. He was essentially a biographer. He put together the story so that way we could understand and we could know in years later what had happened. And as we go through the Acts of the Apostles, one of the things that we see the most is that the church is just exploding and it's growing and people everywhere are getting saved, and that is on purpose. Right? It's not just believers sitting together, hiding away in their churches, going, man, I can't wait for other people to hear about Jesus. It's believers getting out there, going from city to city, country to country, region to region, and they're saying, Jesus Christ has come. He died on the cross for your sake. Now, what's funny about that is that today that's actually considered offensive to say that someone's a sinner. It's funny because in ancient times, everyone's like, yeah, of course, like we're messed up. Mostly because it was a lot easier to look around and see how bad things were. People like to complain about how bad things are today. Things have never been better, ever, in all of recorded human history. Never been better than right now, 2025. Fantastic. All of our problems are problems relative to the fact that life is so easy in comparison to what life was. And that's important for us to keep in mind, because as we go here into the book of Acts, and as we finish off Acts chapter 19, we need to keep that in mind, the challenges and the difficulties they faced. Because guess what? A lot of us, if we're really honest with ourselves, and if we really dig deep and we really be that honest with ourselves, we will admit a lot of times the reason I don't share the gospel is because I'm afraid. Afraid of something, whether it's rejection, you're afraid of persecution, afraid of whatever, but we're afraid. And we have reason to be. Let's read this. Chapter 19, verse 23. And this is, of course, back in Ephesus. About at that time, there arose a great disturbance about the way. You remember I talked about the way, and how the way was actually just the name that they were using for the believers, right? The way of Jesus Christ. And a silversmith named Demetrius, who made silver shrines of Artemis, brought in lots of business for the craftsmen there. And he called them together, and along with the workers in related trades, he said, you know, my friends, that we receive a good income from this business. And you see and hear how this fellow Paul has convinced and led astray large numbers of people here in Ephesus. And in particular, what? Yeah, it says impractically. That's such a weird phraseology. Anyway, and this is, of course, an English translation issue, not a Greek thing. In practically the whole province of Asia. He says that gods made by human hands are no gods at all. There's a danger not only that our trade will lose its good name, but also the temple of the great goddess Artemis will be discredited, and the goddess herself, who is worshipped throughout the province of Asia and the world, will be robbed of her divine majesty. Okay. People have all kinds of different religious beliefs. People have believed all kinds of different things. The one thing that everyone believes in, no matter where you're from, is I need to eat to survive. And whenever that is threatened, that is the ultimate threat to an individual. You want to see people get upset? It's funny because here we'll have we have the different strikes, or we have the different threats from the different unions. They were just dealing with that again with the daycares here in Canada, and there's all these different things where people are fighting for their jobs and stuff like this. And I thought this was really interesting because I remembered when I got into ministry. Right, I remember thinking to myself, if I want to go and preach the gospel, that means I'm going to have to go somewhere. And I don't get to say, hey, I want to be in this town. I get to say, where is the need, and then I have to go there. But I also remember when I was a computer engineer, and there's this strange thing, and it seems to be a more recent phenomenon, right? And by recent phenomenon, I mean in the last 100 years. people didn't used to think this way, but now we have this thought that this is my hometown, this is where I live, and I should be able to work here, and you should come to me or make it available so that I can do it. It's this real entitlement attitude. Because think about it, all through our history, if you were a blacksmith, you went where the trade was needed, right? Thankfully, if you were a blacksmith, you were probably needed just about everywhere. But you get my point. You had to go where the need was. If you wanted to develop a certain set of skills, if you wanted to work in a certain field, then guess what? You learned to, or you had to go where it was needed. And guess what? If you wanted to live somewhere, if living somewhere was more important, then guess what? You had to learn to do what they needed. Not the other way around. We live in this strange time where people seem to think, no, I have some skills that you want, and I don't want to go to you, so you need to come to me. It's a really strange time that we live in. And the fact of the matter is that we have this sense of entitlement. We have this, and whenever someone comes after that, whenever someone else threatens to take that away, there is nothing that will get the hair up on our back quicker than a threat to our livelihood. So on that hand, I totally understand what is happening in this instance. Now, is it or is it not a good thing, right? I'm not going to talk about jobs in Ontario or in small towns in Canada because, there's a whole other debate about this. But I would say easily, unarguably to myself, that what's happening here is actually a good thing. The fact that fewer and fewer people are worshiping Artemis, fewer and fewer people are worshiping idols, I think is a tremendous thing, but you can understand how that's going to make some people upset. They're going after their livelihood. They only made a living. They only got to eat at night. Many of these people, these silversmiths, were actually able to become free men and leave the shackles of slavery behind because of their craft in silversmithing. So when that suddenly gets threatened, they take it really personally. And verse 28 says, when they heard this, they were furious, began shouting, "Great is Artemis of the Ephesians!" And soon the whole city was in an uproar, and people seized Gaius and Aristarchus, Paul's traveling companions from Macedonia, and all of them rushed into the theater together. Paul wanted to appear before the crowd, but the disciples would not let him. Even some of the officials of the province, friends of Paul, sent him a message begging him not to venture into the theater. This is really, obviously, really good, because anger and confusion are never a good combination and never lead to good things. I mean, quite frankly, and I love this, right? They're trying to act indignant for Artemis' sake, right? What are they angry and confused about? They're like, oh, I can't believe this guy is stopping the worship of Artemis. But what was the first thing that got brought up? It was their living. Right? And we do this all the time, don't we? We'll make excuses. We'll be upset about one thing, but we'll realize that's not really a good reason, and people might look down on me for that, so I'm going to act indignant for this other reason. And you see that, for example, in protests. If you ever go to talk to people that are at a protest, it'll be a protest allegedly about one thing, and if you talk to people, you'll hear 30 different opinions about a whole variety of different issues. Because what's really going on is people are angry and confused. That's what's happening. So we're seeing these people, they're mad, they're angry, they're getting all whipped up, and as you know, as a mob gets whipped up, they're not really thinking straight, so it was good that Paul didn't go, because they weren't really going to listen to Paul. They just wanted blood. And it says the assembly was in confusion. Some were shouting one thing, some another. Most of the people didn't even know why they were there. The Jews in the crowd pushed Alexander to the front, and they shouted instructions to him. He motioned for silence in order to make a defense before the people, but when they realized he was a Jew, right, because Jews also didn't believe in Artemis, they all shouted in unison for 2 hours. And, this would be annoying, but good on them. They dealt with it. For 2 hours they heard, "Great is Artemis of the Ephesians." You see this today, right? This isn't something new, old. This isn't something that once happened. This is something that still happens today. You hear about it happen all the time in city council meetings or at different rallies and stuff like that for political leaders. Or even sometimes things that are completely unrelated. People just show up and protest because they think they can get some attention and they want to. That really what it comes down to is we're angry, we're upset, and we want to be heard. And that's what's going on here. They're upset. Our livelihoods are at stake. Things aren't going the way we want. Change came and we don't like it. They're not willing to look at the big picture. They're not willing to actually seek truth. They're acting purely on instinct, emotion. It's this like primal thing inside of each and every one of us. And if any one of you can say, well, that would never happen to me, then I would argue you've never been put in a bad enough situation. It's really easy to get whipped up like this. But eventually, it says the city clerk quieted the crowd. And this is how you quiet a crowd in ancient Rome. Fellow Ephesians, doesn't all the world know that the city of Ephesus is the guardian of the temple of the great Artemis and of her image which fell from heaven? Therefore, since these facts are undeniable, you ought to calm down and not do anything rash. By the way, that's not what I mean. Never tell an angry person to calm down. You ever tried that? Doesn't work. But if you've brought these men here, though they have neither robbed temples nor blasphemed our goddess, if then Demetrius and his fellow craftsmen have a grievance against anybody, then the courts are open. There are proconsuls. They can press charges. There is a right way to do this. If there's anything further that you want to bring up, it must be settled in a legal assembly. Why would that be so important? Because we're after truth. What really happened here? Because guess what? Even then, 2,000 years ago, they realized people get whipped up in a fury. People get whipped up in confusion. They're angry and mad and confused and sad, and they're filled with so much emotion, they don't know what to do with it, so they just lash out. I don't know what to do. We were watching, Claire and I. By the way, and I'll totally recommend this, Amazon just released a new series called The House of David, and it's actually pretty good. I actually really enjoy it. You guys been watching it? It's really good, okay? Like, you're going to notice a couple things. You'll be like, okay, they're going to take some cinematic license, but it doesn't feel heretical. Like, it's good. It's really good, and I really enjoyed it. And there's a scene where David, he just lets out this scream. And Claire was like, why did he do that? It's like, is that just like some creative thing? It's like, no, like he's so filled with emotion. Like he's just gone through this all this stuff, and he doesn't know what to do, so he's just letting it out in the only way he knows how, right? Anyone that's ever been in a situation like that, whether it's some great travesty or great triumph, you know that there's just this welling of emotion, and it comes bursting out of you. And that's what's been happening in this crowd here. The clerk is trying to remind them, guys, there's a right way and a wrong way to do things. And right now, you're on the wrong path. You want to get these people? Fine, press charges, and we'll do it the right way. We'll go after truth and make sure that they are taken down. But verse 40, verse 40 is how you calm down a Roman crowd. As it is, we are in danger of being charged with rioting because of what happened today. And in that case, we would not be able to account for all this commotion since there is no reason for it. And after he had said this, he dismissed the assembly. Why do I say that? People complain a lot today, and for some good reason. They'll complain about police brutality when they're busting up a crowd or busting up a protest or a riot and they're trying to shut things down. And I always say, at least you didn't need to dig a mass grave at the end of the event like the Romans did. The Romans didn't care. If they thought you were in a riot, they shut you down. Well, I mean, the riot of 70 AD in Jerusalem ended up destroying the temple. Right? The Romans went in and said, fine, enough's enough. We're going to break it all up. And that was the end of that. Romans were known for establishing order, their order, when they wanted, how they wanted, and they didn't care who got in their way. You want to disperse the crowd real quick? Tell them, hey, we're getting dangerously close to being you. Oh, yeah, you know what? It's not worth it. Going to back off? See, although people have all kinds of different religious beliefs, people have all kinds of different things that are going on in their lives. As I said before, the most vital thing to anyone is what's going on in our personal lives and how we provide for our families, how we provide for ourselves, our own path to growth. And what we see here is what they need to survive is being threatened. And it doesn't matter what the truth is. Right? Not one of these people is seeking after truth and saying, wait, Is Paul right? Is Artemis fake? Wait, is Paul right? Did Jesus really rise from the dead? Is Jesus really the Savior of the world? Is this what we should do? They're not interested in truth. And so often in our world, so often even in our churches still, right? Because we allow that emotion to take over and we don't allow ourselves to think. And we allow that emotion to cloud our judgment and make us act foolish. Jesus, both then and now, represents a threat to the way things are. Because Jesus represents change. When we're supposed to come to Jesus, we're supposed to do two things. Right? There's two things that Jesus says. One is be baptized. What's the other? Repent. What does repent mean? Turn around. It is the ultimate change. Turn away from everything you're doing. A radical transformation of your entire life. Jesus represents the ultimate change that can happen to an individual. And that is terrifying. Because change means uncertainty. Change means challenge. Change means difficulty. See, as long as people have what they need to survive, people are happy. And you may think, no, people need this, people need this. You know, it's funny. They've actually studied happiness. And one of the wildest conclusions, it's both wild and yet it makes sense to me. One of the wildest conclusions is that the more freedom an individual has, the less happy they are. This makes sense to me, and I'll give you a great example. I go to a restaurant, okay? I like going over to Rosie's for the simple fact that there is one side, flip it over, the other side, and you're done. Those are your options. Great. I'm limited in scope. I can make a choice. You ever go to some place and they hand you like a novel and they go, here, pick from one of these 700 different choices? I hate that. You spend like 20 minutes looking for something to eat. You end up picking something and you're dissatisfied. You're like, I could have had this other thing. That's why food trucks have got it made. They offer one thing. They're like, hey, yeah, we make this. And everyone's like, sure, sounds great. And people are happy. See, the fact of the matter is that this is why happiness shouldn't be the measure that we use to say whether or not lives are successful or things are going well. Because, you know what? There are a lot of very happy people in North Korea who live absolutely terrible lives. But they're happy because at least they got fed that day or that week. They're happy because at least their family home wasn't burned to the ground that day. And we're unhappy because the iPhone got a new connector on the bottom and now I got to get a new cable. Ugh! The more choice we have, the less happy we are. And this is how Rome actually maintained order for as long as it did. It's why they were able to remain such a powerful empire for so long, because most people weren't free, but they were happy enough with what they got. And the truth is, if we really look at and we understand that God is real, and we understand that we are guilty, if we understand that we need to be saved, this is extremely uncomfortable. Right? And it's, as I said at the beginning, it is considered offensive to our culture to tell them, you're a sinner. I mean, I've heard that's become like the rallying cry of the atheist movement today Christianity is so offensive because it says that you're a dirty, rotten sinner. How dare you? How dare you? Don't even know me. I don't need to know you. You're human, aren't you? And it's uncomfortable to face that. It's uncomfortable to deal with that. It's uncomfortable to realize that not only does the world need to change, but I need to change. I have to transform. I have to do that. I have to be uncomfortable. So what do we do? How are we supposed to deal with that? Because as I started off, I said we have reason to be afraid. We have reason to be afraid of being rejected by society or being ostracized or being cut off because of our faith. We have reason to be afraid, but I want to talk to you about someone who was definitely afraid. His name was Joshua. If you remember Joshua in the book of Joshua, Joshua is standing there at the edge of the promised land. And he's looking out across, and Joshua knows better than most, because he was one of the spies that went to the land to spy out the land before. He knows better than most how good the reward and the promise is going to be. He knows how good it's going to be, and yet he stands there with trepidation, because he knows that giants roam those hills, and that every step they take is going to be a battle. Every step they take is going to be a struggle. He knows how good it will pay off. He knows the blessing and the goodness that God will provide them once they are there, but he knows that every step of the way is going to be an utter fight. And an angel of the Lord comes to him and says, "Be strong and courageous." Not once, but 3 times. As he looked in from the outside, he knew. He knew the struggle. He knew the difficulty. You think Joshua wasn't afraid? And I say this to Claire all the time. Being brave doesn't mean not being afraid. Being brave means you can conquer your fear. You can set it aside, and you can throw on that courage and say, God is with me. I have reason to be afraid. I know what waits ahead of me. I know the challenges that are coming. I know what could happen. But I'm going to trust God and say, you know what, if God is saying that this is the right thing, and I know the glory that waits them if they do accept the truth, then it is worthwhile. I've often explained it to people like this, because I've had people tell me, and they get upset with me that I share with them Jesus Christ. And I said, well, how about this? What if I saw you one day and you put on a blindfold and you went to go cross the street, but I saw a car coming down? Would you want me to not tell you? Of course not. I want you to tell me. Like, of course I'd want you to tell me. I could die. I said, well, that's the thing. I see that car coming. I see what awaits you if you don't accept. If you don't listen, if you don't go and persevere and do your own study and take your own time to look at your own faith and examine it for yourself, because at the end of the day, almost every non-believer I've encountered are just people that haven't bothered to think about it, because at the end of the day, the less choices they have to make, the happier they are. And as we've done this thing where we absolutely worship happiness and we think, oh, happiness is the key to everything and we just got to do whatever we can, we allow ourselves to become more and more and more ignorant to the truth. And the truth of the matter is that the world out there is dangerous. The truth of the matter is that we need Jesus Christ. We're a fallen creation and we need to be saved. And that's uncomfortable. And it sucks sometimes. But we also know we can see into the promised land and see the goodness that awaits us if only we're willing to persevere. Be strong and courageous. I don't tell people about Jesus because I'm trying to earn points with Christ. I don't tell people about Jesus because I'm trying to make myself seem more virtuous or better. I'm telling people about Christ because I want them to be saved the same as me. I want them to know the truth the same as me. And that's what I tell them. I say, you know what? Examine it for yourself. Don't tell me how you feel about it. I'll tell you how I feel about it. It's uncomfortable. It's difficult. It's challenging. It's upsetting sometimes. But there's a joy in knowing who I serve. So, as we go forward, as we go from this place, as we get ready to and prepared to go back out into the mission field, be strong and courageous. Know that the Lord is with you. Know God is not going to abandon you. And no matter how hard things get, because life is hard, remember, God's promise does not fade. No matter what challenges we have, let's be strong and courageous. Let's go forward, because let's remember, Joshua led that army. Does it say no one died? No, we know thousands of people died. Thousands of people gave their lives so that millions of people could thrive. They did it because they knew it was worth it. They were willing to sacrifice themselves. They were willing to go out and fight that their children could live in the Holy Land. Are you willing to go out and fight so that more people can get saved and more people will cry out to God, Abba, Father, Hosanna, save us. Be strong and courageous.